The call came in at 11:42 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I had just looked at my phone to see if my husband had texted back. He hadn't. He was working a double shift at the plant and wouldn't be home until past midnight, which meant I was alone in the house with her. Again, I almost didn't pick up. Unknown number, late hour, the kind of call you instinctively let go to voicemail and deal with in the morning when you're better equipped for bad news. But something stopped me. Some pull I couldn't explain then and still can't fully explain now. I answered. "This is St. Litter. Vincent's Medical Center," the voice said. "We're calling for a family member of Halle Mercer." My sister. I was already grabbing my keys before the woman finished the sentence. Halle and I were not twins. People always assumed we were because of how similar we looked. Same dark hair. Same narrow jaw. Same habit of pressing our lips together when we were trying not to say something we'd regret. But she was 14 months older than me, just enough to make her feel like she'd always gotten there first. Seen things first, survived things first, and then quietly cleared a path so I didn't have to. She had moved in with me and my husband Darren 6 months ago. Not because she couldn't support herself. She had a good job, a paralegal at a downtown firm, steady income, her own savings. She moved in because our mother had passed in February, and neither of us wanted to be alone with that grief just yet. It was supposed to be temporary. 3 months, maybe 4. We'd figure it out as we went. What I hadn't fully figured out was how temporary everything would feel once Darren's daughter came back. Opal was 19. Darren's daughter from his first marriage, a marriage that ended when Opal was 3 and that Darren rarely talked about in detail. She'd grown up mostly with her mother in Tucson, visiting Darren in summers, occasional holidays, long stretches of nothing in between. When she'd shown up at our door in April, 2 suitcases and a story about a falling out with her mother's new boyfriend, Darren hadn't hesitated for a second. "She's my daughter," he said. "She needs us." I understood that. I did. But understanding something and living inside it are 2 different experiences. The ER waiting room at St. Vincent's smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. I signed in at the desk and was walked back to a curtained bay where Halle sat on the edge of a hospital bed. A gauze bandage wrapped around her left forearm. Another pressed against the side of her face just below her temple. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. Her expression didn't crumble. That was the thing about Halle. She never crumbled. She just got very, very still. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said back. I pulled the curtain closed and sat in the plastic chair beside her, close enough to see the swelling clearly now, the way the skin around her eye had already started to purple and tighten. Close enough to see that her hands, folded in her lap, were trembling just slightly. "What happened?" I asked. She looked at the bandage on her arm. "I'm fine." "It looks worse than it is." "Halle." She exhaled slowly. "The ER doc says no concussion. The cut on my arm needed 4 stitches. But it's shallow. I just fell wrong when I went down." "When you went down?" She met my eyes then. Just for a second. "We argued," she said carefully. "Who did this to you?" The curtain shifted slightly from the air conditioning. Down the hall someone was crying softly. A monitor beeped in steady, indifferent rhythm. "Opal," she said. I didn't say anything. I sat with that word for a moment, let it settle into its full weight. Opal. 19 years old. Living in my house, eating food I bought, using towels I washed. And she had put my sister in an emergency room on a Tuesday night. "Tell me," I said. Halle looked down at her hands. She came home around 9. She'd been drinking. I could smell it. I asked her if she'd eaten, just making conversation, you know how I do. She said something under her breath. I didn't catch it, so I asked her to repeat herself. A pause. She didn't like that. What did she say? That I had no business asking her anything, that this wasn't my house. Holly's jaw tightened. That I was just a house guest who had overstayed. I kept my voice even. And then I told her I wasn't going to be spoken to that way. She shoved me first. Into the counter. I caught myself on the edge of it, that's the arm. She touched the bandage lightly. When I told her to stop, she grabbed my shoulder and I lost my balance on the stairs. Hit my head on the railing on the way down. The monitor down the hall beeped again. Did you call the police? I asked. No. A neighbor heard the noise and knocked. Opal left. Neighbor called the ambulance. She finally looked at me fully. I didn't want to make it a bigger thing. There it was. I didn't want to make it a bigger thing. There it was. I didn't want to make it a bigger thing. I had heard her say some version of that our entire lives about their father's drinking, about her first boyfriend's temper, about every situation that had required her to absorb something she should have been protected from. How long? I asked. She blinked. How long what? Has she been treating you like this? Halle looked at the curtain. It's been building, she said finally. Since when? Since about 3 weeks after she moved in. She said it quietly, like a confession. Little things at first, coming into the kitchen while I was cooking and making comments, leaving her things in my space, then getting irritated when I moved them, turning off the TV if I was watching it. She trailed off. Little things. And tonight wasn't a little thing. No, she agreed. Tonight wasn't. I drove her back to my house around 1:30 in the morning. Opal's car was not in the driveway. I helped Halle inside, got her settled on the couch with a glass of water and the pain medication the ER had sent home with her, and sat beside her until her breathing went slow and even, and she finally slept. Then I sat in the kitchen alone with the lights off for a long time. I thought about my husband, still at work, unaware. I thought about Opal, wherever she'd gone. I thought about Halle on that couch with 4 stitches in her arm and a bruise spreading beneath her eye. A woman who had driven 14 months ahead of me into every hard thing in our lives so I wouldn't have to face it alone. Lying there because I had let something grow in my own house that I should have addressed months ago. That was mine to carry. I knew it. I had seen the little things Halle mentioned. The comments, the territory staking, the subtle hostility. And I had done what Darren did. I told myself it was a phase. I told myself she was adjusting. I gave her more runway than she had earned because it was easier than the alternative. The alternative stood in front of me now in a very clear, very specific way. Around 3 in the morning, headlights swept across the kitchen wall. A car door closed. A key in the lock. I didn't move. Opal stepped into the kitchen and stopped. She hadn't expected the lights to be off. She hadn't expected the lights to be soft. She hadn't expected someone to be sitting there. She reached for the light switch. When the kitchen flooded with brightness, she saw me, and something shifted in her expression. Not guilt, not remorse, something more like recalculation. You're up late, she said. Halle's asleep on the couch, I said. She came home from the ER an hour ago. A pause. She leaned against the counter, arms crossing over her chest. I didn't mean for her to fall. But you shoved her. Her jaw tightened. She was in my face. She asked if you'd eaten. She was hovering. She's always hovering. The words came out practiced, fluent, like she'd been rehearsing the justification on the drive home. This isn't her house and she acts like she runs it. I'm tired of it. I looked at her. Really looked at her. 19 years old, standing in a kitchen that wasn't hers either, using a competence she hadn't built anything to earn yet. 4 stitches, I said. She blinked. What? She needed 4 stitches, in her arm. I kept my voice flat, and she has a bruise on her face from hitting the railing. Something flickered across Opal's expression, just for a second. Gone before I could name it. It wasn't like I was trying to hurt her, she said. That's not the point, I replied. The point is that you did. She pushed off the counter. Look, I'll apologize in the morning. She was provoking me and I lost it. It happens. It's not that deep. It's not that deep. I let the words sit there for a moment, turned them over, set them back down. Go to bed, I said. We'll talk in the morning. All 3 of us. She hesitated, looking at me like she was trying to read something in my face, Some signal of whether this was actually as serious as I was making it, or whether it would be softened by daylight the way these things usually were. She must have found something unsatisfying because she didn't argue. She went upstairs. I sat in the kitchen for another hour. And somewhere in that hour, something decided itself. I called Darren on his break at 5 in the morning. He picked up on the second ring, voice alert in the way men get when they've been on their feet all night and adrenaline has replaced rest. I told him what happened. All of it. No softening, no cushioning, no careful arrangement of facts to make it easier to receive. Just the truth, start to finish. He was quiet for a long time when I finished. "Is Halle okay?" he asked first. "She will be," I said. "She's asleep." Another silence. I don't know what to say. "You don't need to say anything yet," I told him. "I need you to come home when your shift ends. I need you to sit with this before you talk to her." "Yeah." His voice was heavy. "Yeah, okay." "Darren." I paused. "I need you to hear what I'm about to say without defending anything." "I'm listening." "This didn't start tonight," I said. "And you knew that. You've seen how she talks to Halle. You've heard it, and every time I brought it up, you've told me she was adjusting. That it was hard for her, that she'd come around." He didn't answer immediately. In the background, machinery hummed. "I know," he said finally. "Okay," I said finally. "Okay," I said. "Then come home." He arrived just after 7, still in his work clothes, smelling of machine oil and exhaustion. Halle was awake by then, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, her injured arm resting in her lap. She looked up when he came in and something passed between them. The specific discomfort of two people who care about each other connected to the same painful situation from different angles. "Halle," he said, "I'm sorry." She nodded once. Didn't say he had nothing to apologize for because they both knew that wasn't quite true. Opal came downstairs 20 minutes later. She had pulled herself together, showered, composed. She stopped at the kitchen doorway when she saw all three of us. "Morning," she said carefully. Darren looked at her. I watched him do it, watched him really look, without the reflexive softening that usually moved across his face when he saw her. "Sit down," he said. She sat. Her eyes moved between us. "I already told Dad I was going to apologize," she said, directing it at Halle. "I lost my temper. I'm sorry you got hurt." "You're sorry she got hurt," I said. Opal's gaze shifted to me. "That's not the same as being sorry for what you did," I continued. "Apologizing for the outcome isn't the same as apologizing for the behavior that caused it." She held my eyes. "That's not a fair distinction." "Sure it is," I said. "Try again." A muscle tightened in her jaw. "I shouldn't have put my hands on her," she said, measured, deliberate. "I'm sorry I did." Better. Not complete, not honest from its roots, but better. Darren leaned forward, elbows on the table. "This can't happen again," he said. "And I don't mean the physical part only. I mean how you've been speaking to her. How you treat this house like a place you own instead of a place you're being welcomed into." Opal's chin lifted slightly. "I thought this was your house too." "It is," he said. "And I'm telling you this isn't acceptable." She looked at the table. Something shifted in her, slightly, like a wall taking its first small crack. "She's going to stay with your Aunt Carol for a while," Darren continued. "I called her this morning." Opal's head came up fast. "What? 3 weeks, maybe a month? You're going to see a therapist while you're there. Someone you can actually talk to about what's going on with you, about your mom's situation, about all of it." "I don't need therapy," she said immediately. "You shoved a woman down a flight of stairs," I said quietly. The room went still. I hadn't said it loudly. I hadn't said it with heat or drama. I had just said it with heat or drama. I had just said it, clean. Plain. Exactly what it was. Opal stared at me. "That's not who you want to be," I said. "I don't believe it is, but it's what happened. And the only way it doesn't define you is if you actually deal with the reason it happened." She looked at her father, looking for the exit, for the override, for the way this conversation always ended with someone stepping back so she didn't have to move forward. He didn't give it to her. He held her gaze and said nothing. She looked back at me. You didn't document it, she said, trying to find the edge of her leverage. She didn't file a report, so it's just a family thing. I filed a report this morning, Haley said. It was the first time she had spoken in 20 minutes. Everyone turned to look at her. She kept her eyes on Opal, steady, unhurried. Not to press charges, Halle said. But it's documented. Because if it ever comes to that, I want there to be a record. She tilted her head slightly. Not for you. For the next time. Whatever situation you're in 5 years from now. So that if you've done the work and changed, none of this can be used against you. And if you haven't, it can. Something moved across Opal's face then. Something I hadn't seen on it before. It wasn't guilt exactly, not fully formed, but it was adjacent to it. It was the first real crack. That's, she started. Fair, Halle said quietly. I think it's fair. She left for Carol's 3 days later. She packed 2 bags, the same as when she'd arrived, and Darren drove her. I stood in the doorway and watched the car back out of the driveway and turn onto the street and disappear around the corner. The house felt different after that. Not lighter, not right away, but cleaner. Like a window had been opened in a room that had been shut too long. Halle stayed for another month. She healed. The stitches came out on schedule. The bruise faded through its spectrum of purple and yellow in skin. She started cooking again, something she'd stopped doing in the weeks before the hospital. And the smell of garlic and olive oil moving through the house in the evenings started to feel like something restored. One afternoon, she was sitting on the porch when I came home from running errands, coffee cup in both hands, looking out at the street. She called me, Halle said when I sat down beside her. Opal, she'd been in therapy for 2 weeks. She wanted me to know. I waited. She said she'd been carrying a lot of anger about her mom's situation that she hadn't known where to put. And she'd been putting it in me because I was the safest target. Because you wouldn't push back, I said. Because she thought I wouldn't. Halle looked down at the coffee cup. She wasn't wrong, was she? You pushed back when it counted, I said. Halle was quiet for a moment. She apologized, she said. A real one. Not the morning after kind. She paused. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. You don't have to do anything with it yet. You don't have to do anything with it yet, I said. She nodded. We sat there for a while, letting the late afternoon stretch out in front of us. You know what I keep thinking about? She said. What? Mom would have wanted this to be fixable, she said. She always thought things could be fixed if people were willing to be honest. I thought about our mother. About how she had navigated hard things her whole life with a kind of quiet fortitude that never looked like effort even when we knew it cost her something. About how she had taught us, by example more than instruction, that accountability wasn't the same as punishment, that asking someone to face themselves was sometimes the most generous thing you could do. It can be fixable, I said, if she does the work. And if she doesn't? Then she doesn't, I said. And that's hers to carry. Halle leaned back in her chair and looked at the sky. I'm glad you didn't let it go, she said. I looked at the neighbor's oak tree at the end of the driveway, the way the light came through it in October, gold and complicated. I let it go too long, I said, but not past the point of no return. No, I agreed, not past that. A car went by. A kid on a bicycle. The ordinary quiet of a Tuesday afternoon settling around us like something earned. I had not fixed everything. I knew that. Darren and I still had conversations ahead of us about what it meant to protect the people under your roof, even when doing so is uncomfortable. Opal still had work to do that had nothing to do with me. Halle still had grief she was carrying. About our mother, about what she had absorbed quietly for too long, about the space between what people are capable of and what they actually choose. But the door that had been jammed for months was open now. And sometimes that's enough to start with. Sometimes the most important thing isn't resolution. It's refusing to pretend anymore. It's saying clearly, this happened, it mattered, and we are not moving past it without first moving through it. My husband learned something that fall. So did Opal, I hope. So did I. Halle already knew it. She had just been waiting, the way she always had, for the rest of us to catch up. I used to think that keeping the peace was the same as doing the right thing. For a long time, those two things felt identical to me. You absorb the friction, you give people room to adjust, you tell yourself that patience is a form of generosity. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just avoidance dressed up in quieter clothes. What happened with Opal didn't come from nowhere. That's the part I've had to sit with longest. The entitlement she walked through my house with, the way she spoke to Halle like she was furniture that had been misplaced, the casual certainty that her discomfort mattered more than anyone else's safety. None of that built overnight. It built because the people around her, including me, kept stepping back every time she pushed forward. We called it patience, we called it giving her time. But what we were actually doing was teaching her that there were no walls, that she could keep going and nothing would stop her. Halle paid for that lesson with 4 stitches and a bruise she wore for 2 weeks. I think about the night I sat in that dark kitchen a lot. The headlights coming across the wall. The key in the lock. The way Opal walked in and found me there and immediately started calculating, not feeling, calculating, what version of events would get her back to comfortable fastest. That's what I keep returning to, not the anger of it, the mechanics of it. The way a person who has never genuinely faced a consequence moves through the world like consequence is something that happens to other people. What changed that night wasn't dramatic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten her. I just refused to make it smaller. And that refusal, that single steady refusal to let the truth be renegotiated into something easier to live with, was the thing that actually shifted the room. Because Opal had encountered frustration before. She had encountered disappointment. What she had not encountered was a wall that didn't move. Darren had to face something that fall too. He's a good man. I believe that, but good men can fail the people they love through inaction just as completely as bad men can through intent. Every time he saw something and chose to call it a phase, he was making a decision. He just didn't frame it that way to himself. That's the thing about avoidance. It always feels like restraint until you see the cost of it sitting across from you in an emergency room. What I learned, the thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation is this: accountability is not cruelty. Requiring someone to face what they've done is not the same as destroying them. In fact, it might be the most honest form of care available, the belief that a person is capable of something better than what they've been doing, and the refusal to let them stay comfortable in something less. Halle already understood that. She had just been waiting patiently the way she always waited, for the rest of us to find our way to the same place. We got there. Late. But we got there. And sometimes that's exactly enough to start building something real.